Absolutely.
Yeah,
And it goes, and I know I keep saying this over and over and over again, but for me, it goes back to Adrienne Marie Brown's "We Will Not Cancel Us,"
right.
because it's one of these things, and I love it to death, but we have so often that those who are in our immediate proximity are the ones that drive us nuts the most. And so,
Absolutely.
but then there's also not this reckoning with this systemic understanding, like you said, where we're like there. And this is one of these things I just need kind of a slight internal check with my students, because you can make a social justice critique almost anywhere, because whiteness, capitalism, patriarchy, genderism, all these things are so embedded in.
Yeah,
The underlying question is, are you looking to get over? Or are you looking to lift someone up? Right? Are you
right.
saying that, in the spirit of we need each other in community, am I trying to tear you down, or are we trying to actually build something together? And a huge check on that becomes, okay, there was this BIPOC prof that said something was a little problematic. And I get that. And I don't discount that. And then my question would be, when was the last time that you got upset and organized and started complaining to the president of the university that actually created a racist policy or a transphobic policy, or just capitulated to the central administration? Like, and so again, it doesn't undermine the critique, but it says, if you're only going after those that are in your immediate proximity, A, you don't have as big a proximity as you need to. B, you're not thinking
Right.
systematically. And C, all you're going to end up doing is lighting up folks like us, when in fact we need each other to be able to do this work. And that's a tough and complicated approach to do this work.
It is. It requires all kinds of focus on relationship and all that.
Of
But it's
course.
also a good jump off point. You set me up perfectly all night, man. And I know you got to get out of here. So before you get out of here, I'm wondering, man, are you hopeful about the solidarity you're seeing? Like, again, this May Day, we talked before we went live.
Yeah, yeah.
Feels like, there's Free Palestine protests happening along with immigrant rights protests, and along it feels like there's um some acknowledgement of the ways that all these freedom fights and battles are intertwined,
Exactly.
right?
And that's exactly it. That it does occasionally make the analysis a little thin, but I would rather deal with that than deal with, if I had a nickel for every time from the 60s through the 90s. So I would talk to old cats, and then in my formative years, where I would hear, you can't say anything else because it distracts from us.
Right, right.
And and one of the things that I loved, absolutely loved this, was there was a cat who was involved in the 60s blowouts, who I was talking with in the early 2000s. Very proud of the work that he did and that the collective did. But he confided in me and said, you know what? If I'm honest with you, the modern day activists are actually better than we were, even though we get the credit, because they're able to navigate multiple systems of oppression concurrently, and that creates a wider net, and it gets them more power in the process, and it actually moves us toward more liberatory futures in that process.
I love that.
And that for me is everything, because it says,
Yeah,
and it's not trying to say, oh, we're better, but because what I'm seeing also is that contemporary students, they do need a little bit more of a crash course in sort of the direct action methods, because they're so on their phones, and digital is like their area, that's their
yep,
forte.
yep.
So much better than me in that. And at the same time, the way that they're able to create these spaces is just a very natural extension of themselves, and being able to be in space and then to create these radical democratic imaginaries is incredible. And so I see
Right.
so much potential there, because you're right. Like, without our without our white supremacist and neoliberal paradigms in the United States, we're not supporting a genocidal regime in Israel. And so all of these
Not at
are,
all.
they're absolutely, if we're not having the need for capitalist exploitation, and concurrently with white supremacy, we're not able to leverage the xenophobic fears of, Juan and Jose as they're coming across the border. We see them as brothers who are here to work. And if there's a bad apple, then you don't, anyone who's been on a
Right.
farm knows, yeah, you want to get a bad apple out, but you know what? You don't take the whole bushel and throw that out in the process. You take the bad apple, you remove it.
Right.
But unfortunately, it's this ham-handed way of seeing everybody homogeneously as the enemy. And that's the beauty of these spaces, is even when we disagree, there is no enemy within, as the way that Trump said it. We are all brothers and sisters in the struggle, and that makes it very powerful.
And I think that's probably the most revolutionary position that we can take, right? Is that we are going to truly embrace what Adrienne Maree Brown talks about in We Will Not Cancel Us, of that we are all fully human. Problems, I'm problematic in a lot of ways, right? And I want to grow and I wanted all that. And I want to be able to do that with people who recognize my humanity and are going to hold me accountable. And those are the spaces where I think we're gonna see some real change as we show up and demand, like, Mahmoud Khalil's release, Ramesma Ozturk's release,
Yes.
demanding these, a stop to. I couldn't even wrap my head around. I told my students about the young kids deported, and then they have Marco Rubio and Hallman on the news talking about, we didn't deport those. The moms took them with them.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's just it's so disingenuous and so dishonest. But it's also just exactly what you would expect from white capitalist patriarchy. In my mind, like, this is the fruition of everything that could possibly go bad, and the erosion of all the things that make us good is what we're seeing right now.
But I see it taking it one step further, and that's that even with, white supremacist, capitalist, neo-colonialist, heteropatriarchy in the past, George W. Bush, this hurts me to say it, God dang it, they're all politicians and they all try to spin their stuff in the positive way. But there was a certain grounding in reality, even when he's lying. This one just takes it to the next level. They are never wrong. They're the most righteous. And what's weird is, like, you could kind of see where Bush was going, like where he's, it's like, I want to invade Iraq because Saddam Hussein tried to kill my dad. And you could see he's actually has a plan. This is just chaos. There's no, and I don't even, I obviously there was the whole thing with, well, we're going to reduce these tariffs so the stock market is going to bounce back, but all y'all get your, do your buying now so that you can make, your $1 billion.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's all sorts of insider trading and all this stuff, but I honestly don't think that was. I think that's more of a byproduct than the actual focus. And for right now, it just there's nothing. Like, it just feels like, Actually, John Mulaney said it really well when he talked about, if you let a horse loose in a hospital, some crazy stuff is going to happen.
Yeah.
And that's really, and it's funny because he wrote that bit about the first Trump administration, and now we're seeing it really come into fruition. And it's just, and I used to compare Trump to the Joker, where he'd be like, I'm an agent of chaos. But if you look at the Joker, even there were kind of underlying weird principles, a strategy, even though he'd say, do I look like I have a plan? Actually manifest, you kind of do.
Kind of, yeah.
This dude, it's just like, well, it's like dealing with an impulsive 5-year-old, where they're like, I want ice cream for dinner and I don't want to go to bed and I'm going to do this and I'm not going to tie my shoes and I'm not going to put them on my jacket. I'm going to do this. It's like, it's just dealing with that constantly and then saying, oh, but everything they're doing is the most brilliant thing ever. And then
and it's like, that's the whole point of what they're supposed to be doing too. Like the cabinet meetings and everything is just, they got the hats around with the Gulf of America and stuff. It's just like, this is the most absurd. It would be a bad parody if it wasn't reality.
Exactly.
Right? Exactly. Like, this would be a movie script that people like, this is not feasible.
Absolutely. Because
and here we are.
It's bizarre how, but this is also, I think you hit the nail on the head though, that there is at the core of it a bunch of guys who grew up without love, without compassion, without any of this stuff. And then you're just seeing it manifest. That, the whole idea of wounded people wound others. You're seeing it right now because even
Absolutely.
all the stuff from Donald Trump, with his dad, and and I mean, and then he becomes an image, not a person. To the point that
Right.
he didn't even want to name his son Don Jr. because, well, what if the kid's a loser? I don't want that to be my legacy. It's like that is some cold-blooded. That's wow.
You can't scream help me more loudly than that.
Exactly. But then
Yeah.
it seems like, all these folks, Stephen Miller, etc. I mean, Steve Bannon. If that cat had gotten his contract as a screenwriter, and not been so hurt about it because, I need my Hollywood, moment. It's like we wouldn't be dealing with so much of this nonsense. But so many of these
Right.
cats is exactly what they are. They have the entitlement of whiteness, which then leads them, when it doesn't manifest, and it doesn't also make them happy, that they take it out on the rest of us.
Right.
And so I can understand the psychology, but I don't condone it. I say, like, look, this is the enemy who we're dealing with, and we know where they're coming from. That anything that disagrees with them is going to be attacked and tried to be demolished. And at the same time, it's one of those things that they also show their weakness, because that's exactly, well, I mean, that is by definition a weak man. And I use man
Yeah. By
intentionally.
definition.
By definition. Because if I said, Ryan, you're wrong about that, you'd be like, oh, well, let's think about that. What are we talking about? We'd engage in this.
I would be curious about that I don't.
Exactly. But then through that, we actually address our weaknesses, which is,
Right.
and then we grow and grow stronger in the process, and we grow stronger together, because I have to have a vulnerability to call you in on that, and you have to have a vulnerability to grow from that. And that is a strength in and of itself right there. But unfortunately, right now, strength is only through like these Andrew Tates and all these cats. And like, I literally had a dude call because he hadn't seen me before I shaved my head.
Yeah.
And he called me Andrew Tate today at the gym. And I was like, bro, this guy's a sex trafficker. And he's like,
just a terrible human being.
Exactly. And he's like, yeah. And actually, he was doing, I found out later he was doing it because he likes poking at me a little bit for being on the left of center. And he's like, but he actually did realize, guy, he doesn't read. He's an idiot. He doesn't, he's a sex trafficker. He's just a horrible person.
Yeah.
And that actually the horrible person became the joke. But I was like, bro, let's not joke about that. Because
right. For real.
Yeah. Let's find something else,
Yeah.
How many other guys got this dude?
I was gonna say, if that's what we're told, that's a low bar for entry right there. For real.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, man. I know you got to run. Thank you so much for being here. Happy May Day.
Happy May Day.
Let's do this again. It's always good to chop it up with you.
Always, man. Always. I appreciate you throwing it down. I appreciate you putting it out there. And most of all, when we say Happy May Day, we need to remember that we are taking joy in the history of collective struggle against these oppressive practices. And that's why I like that, because happy something, it always comes off as like, hey, happy birthday, happy this, happy that. And it's like, no, amidst the space that is meant to kill our joy and kill our personhood and destroy our families and our communities, happy May Day to that, as we resist in the process.
Absolutely. That part.
There we go. That's what's up.
I'm not even gonna say nothing else, y'all. Y'all heard it. Happy May Day. Peace, y'all.
Peace.